Welcome. It's another day here at the Great Work MBA. Today the focus is around the theme of purpose. And boy, do we have a great guest to kick things off with you today, Pam Slim. We're going to have such a great conversation with her. But before we go there, quick reminder, if you haven't done it already, and I know many of you have, sign up for the e-course that supports this whole program. greatworkmba.com. You can sign up there. It's all free and you get additional support and resources and all sorts of good things there. And if you were to buy one book, just one book, as part of this whole process, could I recommend the End Malaria book? Pam is in fact one of the contributors there. All of the proceeds of this book go to Malaria No More, so it does good in the world. I'd love to sell a few more copies, get a few more bed nets out in the world, saving nets. 60 great contributors. Pam is one of the great contributors. And there's plenty of other good books from all the other speakers at this thing, but if you're just to buy one book, think about that book. So Pam Slim, you can see her beautiful face and her funky dress there on the screen. You may know Pam from her book Escape from Cubicle Nation, which was a justifiable classic. It is all about, believe it or not, escaping from Cubicle Nation, which is if you've been in the corporate world, how do you think about getting out into the outside world? But this is, I'm not even sure, I'm thinking 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 years old now. And because 5 years old, man, and because I am Pam's friend, I have the inside track on all the new stuff that she's doing, and she's up to some great stuff. In fact, she has a new book coming out at the end of the year called Body of Work, and we're going to get into that and into something that she specifically got some really strong opinions on, which is about how to find your roots. Now, Pam, as you know, we've got 27 minutes here. The time starts now. There we go. We're starting the countdown. And Pam, so welcome. It's so awesome to see you again. I know you're in Boston at the moment, even though you're based in Arizona. Hooray!
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. Totally delighted.
Perfect. All right, so let me ask you this question. Your first book, Escape from Cubicle Nation, this has been your next book is about your body of work. What do you mean by body of work, and why is that even important?
Yeah. As I've done so much work around entrepreneurship and talking with people who wanted to lead corporate life because they weren't happy, then I wanted to help provide a specific path for that, for starting your own business, which is Escape from Cubicle Nation. But sometimes people can be very light and dark side of the force. Corporate is bad and entrepreneurship is good, when really, as an individual and as somebody who's worked in many different work modes, I think the interesting thing is really to look at the purpose of our life as creating a body of work that we're very proud of, whether we're in corporate or a nonprofit or academic institution or have our own business.
Right.
So because I think the world is inherently unstable now, and I don't see it improving any day soon, if we keep that focus as opposed to a career track or a business path, I think it's going to open up opportunities. And in the new book, I really outline what I feel are some of the core skills that you need to do to give you more flexibility.
Got it. Well, let me just check in on this, because I know a lot of the people who are in your tribe, and you have a pretty awesome tribe who love you and adore you. A lot of those are probably more in the entrepreneurial field, the small business world. Convince me that body of work actually is relevant if I work for a big organization, or is this more this kind of touchy-feely, who knows what those Silicon Valley types are doing?
I feel it's really relevant. What's really interesting is actually a core inspiration for the book is my dad, who worked inside a company, Pacific Gas and Electric, in California, a big utility, for most of his career. He's a photojournalist.
Right.
And he has always been somebody that I've been inspired by my entire life, who as an artist, as a photographer, is very focused on craft, but also was somebody who really enjoyed being in the structure of a company, but also did a lot of interesting things outside as a volunteer, as a freelancer. He's actually 78 years old and still freelancing.
Wow.
So, and because I spent so many years inside companies, I think the main thing that we're talking about is creating great things, of which many can happen inside a company. I've been in fantastic teams. I've had amazing mentors when I was in corporate. And again, I think it's a bit of the marketing hype that I probably contributed to a little bit with Escape from Cubicle Nation.
Right.
Really what our focus is, I think, as human beings, is creating great things and solving problems that we all care about.
Yeah.
So that's really what the book is about.
So I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, because obviously for me talking about great work, the people I had in mind when I wrote Do More Great Work is engaged but overwhelmed middle managers and leaders who are going, look, I like my work. I don't want to escape cubicle nation. I want to make a difference here, and I'm battling the machine. And how do you help people find ways through the status quo, have real impact in the work that they're doing? So it's great to hear that what you're talking about with body of work applies both to the entrepreneurial folks, but also folks who are being perhaps entrepreneurial but within that organization piece. Now, Pam, let me ask you this. I know one of the things that you stand for, and is perhaps a little controversial or provocative in the new book, is you're saying to people, stop worrying about finding your purpose. And for any of us who've done any thinking about this, quite often that's the first place we go. What's my purpose? What am I doing here? What's the big thing? But your piece is around purpose versus roots. And I know you have a mixed martial arts background, so I'm imagining some sort of cool black belt cage fight between purpose and roots. And I know you're putting your money on the roots, so tell me what the difference is, and tell me why, for you, finding your roots and looking at that as a source of wisdom is more important or perhaps more valuable than going to the purpose piece.
Yes, I've always been influenced and I've loved the idea of purpose, of understanding that there's a reason for us being on earth, that there's something that can help guide and direct us in our lives.
Yeah.
Certainly in great organizations, usually there's a lot of unity around a shared understanding of the purpose. What happens, and what I've learned in 8 years, specifically these last 8 years of working with individuals, is when you tell people to first start with finding their life purpose, they get in about 13 shades of angst.
Right.
And they sit on a mountaintop and they think they need to go to Nepal, and then they, read every book and take everybody's course, and then they start banging their head against the wall because they can't find the one single purpose.
Right.
That idea of one purpose is inherently flawed in that for some people, they are born having a clarity of like, this is really what I'm meant to do. Maybe a very focused artist who just really sees that.
Right.
For people, the metaphor I feel is more realistic is we can have many things that we feel deeply emotionally engaged to. Right. And that's where that metaphor of what I like about roots is also, if you think about a tree being organic and something that grows and changes over time, you have new roots, you have ones that die off, you have, all those things where that to me is more what is an easier, more engaging place to get Right. people moving. So if you feel really stuck and somebody, for example, knows they love corporate life, they know they're maybe not quite in the right position, but they don't know where to go. They're in software engineering and they're not sure which direction to go. One of the places to start is just to ask questions like, what upsets you? Like, what problem do you just bang your head against the wall
Right.
about? Customer situations are you finding that when you think about them, you get like real emotional engagement? Like, have you ever seen people who are passionate about fonts? If
Right.
you've ever graphic marketing?
Yeah. There are people out there who go, like it's Helvetica or death. That's your choice, man.
No, I mean, it's like they see a PowerPoint slide and if it's not the right font, I mean, they will like throw things at it and write horrible, scathing emails. And to me, that's fantastic because it shows that they have a definite opinion and a strong passion for that particular topic. So, I mean, that could be a great starting point to begin to figure out what's that next thing that I want to create or contribute to.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear that about the purpose piece because, I've spent a fair amount of my time dabbling my toes into the world of coaching and values and purpose stuff. And I've never really found a purpose statement that has felt useful, in the sense that sometimes I felt like this would be a great purpose statement. It just doesn't quite ring true for me, but it's the best I can come up with, and I don't want to be embarrassing anybody else around here by going, yeah, I couldn't find a purpose. Or even if I found something that felt like it resonated, it's hard to sometimes know what does that really tell me about what to do and how to act in the here and now. And what you're taking me from is kind of stuck in my head a little bit into the world of strong emotion and going, yeah. There's something about that what you're feeling actually is a gateway to wisdom.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Help me out with this because I'm a white Anglo-British guy. So I don't do feelings, right? I'm struggling with it. I'm like, so I've heard of feelings, but how do I find that? So just on the off chance that there are some other guys out there who also, other people who may be not quite as adept as you as to tapping into emotion. Can you give me a sense of how I might get better at kind of figuring out what I'm responding to or reacting to?
Yeah. There's something I heard Jim Collins speak in the year 2000 in Phoenix at a Fast Company conference when they used to run the best conferences. It was a conference on design.
Right.
And it was before Good to Great came out. And he talked about his own process of discovery of figuring out what he liked. And he is obviously a very analytical person. And he described getting a notebook, which he called a bug called Jim, where he wrote down all kinds of notes, observing when he had certain reactions to things. So he'd be in a meeting and would hate it. And he'd down, Jim doesn't like a meeting. So for people who might be a little bit less connected from the emotions, one thing is to have a place in which you can be writing down times where all of a sudden you do get a surge of emotion. I just gave a talk here. I'm in Boston for a conference. The talk was on roots, not surprisingly. And I told a couple stories, and one of them was about my son, who my husband is Navajo and has long hair, and long hair is very treasured and valued within Navajo culture.
Right.
And my son, who's 8 years old, also has long hair, and I was driving him home one day, and he was told me he was getting teased, and kids at school said he was like a girl because he had long hair.
Right.
So I got very, I raised my fist like a 46-year-old Malcolm X, suburban. And I was so passionate about saying, whenever anybody says that, you look them right in the eyes and you tell them, I am Navajo and proud, and this is part of my culture that makes me a warrior and so forth. So I was shaking, my son was a little frightened of me. But after I had somebody come up who was Sikh, actually, originally from India, and it was so neat because we had that connection, and they have a probably a little different philosophical, spiritual belief, but long hair is also part of the tradition. And he came up and said, that really resonated with me because I think about that, for my kids, and I've had that experience. And so for him, when he was sitting there listening to my presentation, which is what anybody else, when you're out there in the world and you're watching TED Talks and you're at a conference, when you have a moment of emotional connection where you say, I feel that, or that reminds me of something, or that moved me, that's what you want to start to pay attention to. And sometimes it moves you because you feel it's beautiful. Sometimes it taps into pain. Sometimes it's they're not using Helvetica font. I want to stab somebody with a pencil. And those are great things to notice. It's really any emotion, sadness, fear, anger, joy, all of them are great clues to get down to your roots.
Very nice. So when I think about emotions, just if this is useful for folks listening in, I have a list of 5, and 5 I can remember. Any more than 5, I've got a middle-aged man's brain, I'm struggling. And these rhyme, they're a bit like the 7 dwarfs. So I think mad, sad, glad, ashamed, and afraid. So for me, because I suspect, Pam, I'm projecting here, but I suspect you notice these little surges of emotion. Me too, but perhaps to a lesser extent. But sometimes for me, the process that's useful is to go, if I was feeling one of these 5 things or a combination, because I am feeling, you can't not feel. It's like you're wired to feel. Which of those 5 rings most true for me, and what does that actually look like and feel like? So in some ways I come from the brain side to go, I must be feeling something, so what the hell is it at this stage? And that can help me tap into that.
That's wonderful. I'd only heard of the 4, mad, sad, glad, or scared. And I like ashamed. Brene Brown would be very proud of that.
Exactly. Well, Brene's one of the speakers here, so I'm sure when I'm talking with her, we're going to get right into shame and vulnerability and all that kind of juicy stuff, and I'll look on intellectually, go, I have no idea what you're talking about, but let's carry on regardless. That's fine. So strong emotion response to things that frustrate you is one way to tap into your roots as a way of sort of going, this is something that I need to make a stand against, I guess, in the world. Is that what you're saying?
It can be. It can also just be a clue for what it is that actually interests you. And one of the stories I told yesterday, that when I used to teach capoeira, Afro-Brazilian martial art, we would do school performances. And there was we do it in front of kids, and then we do a performance and invite kids to come and do a presentation. And at the end of one at a particular school in San Francisco, this little shy kid came up and kind of volunteered last to go, and he, in capoeira you do cartwheel into the circle and then do spinning kicks and stuff. So this little kid started out, did a cartwheel, and then exploded as if he was Bruce Lee and Enter the Dragon.
Fantastic.
And all the kids and the faculty were just cheering and screaming. And after the presentation, the principal came up to me and she said, "This is astounding. This kid just came here from Vietnam about a year ago, and we've been so concerned. He was so terribly introverted and shy. We just thought he was totally disconnected from his emotions." And she said, "I don't even know who I saw out there." The metaphor I could think of is like he unleashed his inner tiger. All of a sudden, everyone could see it. That's an example. And I felt this huge surge of pride and joy and tears and everything. But what that really led me to understand, a part of my root, connected to my purpose for being on earth, is helping people to identify and unleash their true selves, because everybody has it. And in fact, many of the corporate folks that I worked with for so many years were just like that little boy. They had this carefully, cultivated persona, but they were totally dead inside.
Right.
But there's this tiger that they're kind of afraid to let out. And so a lot of the work that I ended up doing over many years with people is getting more in touch with that and saying, it's okay, like let the tiger out, in our conversation, and then figure out ways you can actually create a career or a business around those, your true self.
Okay, this is a useful thing for people to hear, because what you're pointing to is what to notice. As you felt that emotion, seeing that little kid kind of come out and unleash the tiger within.
Yeah.
The most superficial level might have been, I love teaching this form of martial arts. But actually, you're like, so what's important about that? And you drop down a couple of levels to go, what this is really about is giving people an opportunity to unleash their tiger, or however you might personally phrase that. And I just think that's something for people to be aware of, because sometimes we get hooked into the specific skills or situation and go, that's the answer, as opposed to there's a deeper theme here that might be really what you're pointing to.
Well, it is, and I think what's interesting about it is often we don't see it ourselves because we're so close to it, which is why it's very important to have people around you that you can discuss things with and say, what do you notice about here are the things I'm interested in, what are the patterns that you see? There are some people who are tremendously skilled at hearing it and understanding, themes and patterns based on the way that they're wired. If anybody does Myers-Briggs, it tends to be the N, right? On the N, the S versus the N dimension. And so sometimes it's not just that you write down in your notebook, yes, what you're feeling and what you're interested in, but then you take the time to reflect on what might this mean in terms of bigger patterns. I notice in my own career, freedom and transformation tend to be huge themes throughout just about everything I've ever done. Teaching martial arts, entrepreneurship, even in corporate life, really like transforming an organization and doing organizational development. So those are, it really is a couple different steps. If you write down the raw data, and then you want to step back and say, what does this mean? But I think the meaning you can often get by paying attention to it for a while, just kind of noticing first, gathering notes, and then you start to say, what might this mean? One of the metaphors I use in the book is we really just have all these different ingredients. We have all this different skills and experience, and there's like one recipe, like I have to use all of it here. I was just here yesterday, and we were putting up big white posters on the wall, and I realized one of my ingredients that I'm really good at is taking off tape, because I put up flyers for years in San Francisco to run a martial.
It's a gift.
And I can't believe I forgot about that skill, right?
That's right.
That was useful yesterday. But, we can use these things in so many different combinations, and that's, I think, this whole notion of just a career track gets people very stuck, because have your ingredients that work well for one career track, but then shift a little bit of the combination and you can do something really different.
Nice. So Pam, look, we're just clicking down to past 10 minutes to go. I know, time flies, etc., etc. People are wanting to go, okay, I've got the piece about the strong emotion and particularly a response to something. If you were to give them some other guidelines or strategies or tactics to have a sense of what their roots are and what nourishment they can draw from those roots, where else would you take us?
The other interesting thing, I think, I'm kind of on this like nature theme metaphor for the last couple of days, but one of the ways that you can really expand your thinking about different areas in which you can work, because again, the context we're talking about is really figuring out your great work, possibilities around your work. And I know certainly for me, it's about maybe, spending some time really thinking holistically about what is it that you want to do next. So when you think of the kinds of things that you're interested in, it's very interesting to think about it in terms of ecosystems as well.
Oh,
Who are
nice.
people who tend to gather around these kinds of interests? Are there communities of people who are also have a shared interest in what it is that you do? Seth Godin would call them tribes, right? Tribes of people that form around, educational reform or font, stuff, whatever the font stuff people do.
Yeah, yeah.
Open source coding. And so when you notice that you have this deep interest in something, then that's when you can start to take it a little bit deeper and figure out, who else cares about this? Who can help me?
Find your people.
Yeah, and by being connected with other people in the ecosystems, that's really what I find both helps you understand and kind of clarify your ideas because you see how other people are interpreting it. You really discover your own point of view. But at the same time, you discover the market opportunities. So
right.
companies that are working in this area, if you work for yourself, where are your clients, right? And where could potential partners be? That's, I think, how you and I have always connected is we're in this ecosystem of these, my friend calls it, who's a hardcore business guy, from banking, calls us the yoga people. It's like these weird yoga people, like you're smart, but you're kind of nice. And it's just, but we have like this yoga people connection of other, like-minded individuals, each of whom does a certain piece of work within an area. And I find, again, the context often of our own roots and our own purpose in our work is not just with ourselves, but it's also how that relates to other people who are trying to solve similar.
Well, let me ask you a question, because one of the things that you are truly gifted at and you have a great capacity for is gathering people. You have a wonderful way of not just hanging out with your people, but being a hub for your people and a way of bringing them together. So I'm wondering, if I'm wanting to do more than just kind of show up and hang out with these people, assuming I can find my people, which I'm sure I could, how would I what tips might you offer in terms of playing a more active role in being the hub and being the centerpiece so that you begin to attract and kind of more actively almost curate the people who might be in that sphere that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think you can think of it a couple different ways. And one is where if you are somebody interested in writing and sharing ideas, if you have a blog, which I think for people who are interested even within corporate, can be a great way of sharing ideas, that you can feature other people within your ecosystem on your blog. You can do interviews. You can expose people to others as a way to share ideas, which is a very powerful way to give everybody a voice and to support, and grow many different perspectives.
I mean, this conference is a case in point. I mean, I basically went, who are 25 awesome people who I'm just really interested in, and how can I make an excuse to hang out with them a bit online and talk to them and be a center point? And, it's really driven by my own interest around, these are just cool people, case in point. So I think that's a great suggestion. But I interrupted you. Sorry, Pam.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry.
No,
I think we may be having kind of connection problems. Right, we're having a connection problem, but not only in the technical sense, not in the spiritual sense. So you're going to say a second tactic or something about how to gather folks together?
Yeah, so one is where you do share on a blog through video, different voices. Another one is where you actually actively do have in-person meetups. There's everything from a mastermind group, which I know you've always been a very important influence in your life, where you gather a core group of like-minded people with different specialties to meet on a regular basis in order to share ideas. But you can do the same thing here in Boston. I've had a number of clients and friends that are all from this area. So when I've been here, I hosted a dinner, and then we got to, a few of us got together for coffee as a way to introduce people to each other. And it's a way for me to see them in person, but I think nurturing those connections can be really, really important. And then the final thing I would say is, even for things like conferences, sometimes you can actively either, support somebody who is a colleague or in your ecosystem by going where it is that they speak and kind of adding to that voice, or you can be actively pitching things like panels. You and I have been, going at it where, one of these times we're going to get into South by Southwest and things together where we can really collaborate and share ideas, but in front of other people, so we show that collaboration.
I love that. So you pointed to two really important sources of root. One is the emotion. What's the mad, sad, glad, ashamed, afraid feelings you have, and what does that tell you? One is also about who are your people and how can you strengthen and deepen your focus and your engagement with an area, with your roots, by the people you hang out with. In like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, is there one other kind of deep source of wisdom about that you could call your roots that you're tapping into here?
I think one of the things that we often forget about, and it's sometimes a place where us coaches like to go, but I think it's quite powerful, is in looking way back.
Right.
So there are things we notice from today, but then there are other things we notice from way back in our childhood, from looking at our family systems, from thinking about times. I realize not everybody had an ideal childhood. I mean, I was very lucky to always be very supportive. My parents got divorced when I was about 5, but still it was they worked well together. So when I have memories, for example, I mean, they often say the age of 10 is one of the great places to go, is to notice what it is that you enjoy at the age of 10 is often something that also gives you a real clue about your natural connected ways of working. I think Gretchen Rubin from the Happiness Project is the one who gave that particular exercise.
Ah, that's really interesting, because I know when I think back to what I was doing at the age of 10, mostly what I was doing is trying to boss my 2 brothers around. And quite frankly, that's exactly what I do now. It's just a little more subtle about it, and I call it facilitation instead. So, that's fantastic. So to the folks who've been listening into this, we've covered a bunch of things. We've got not much time left, just a little under 3 minutes left. And I'm wanting the people who are listening to you, Pam, and pulling away some of these great insights. What I'm wanting from them is to reflect on what you covered in the 25 and a half minutes so far, and write down, if they would, just the 2 key takeaways for them around, here's what was most valuable, most insightful. And make sure you write that down, because if you just let Pam's words of wisdom kind of wash over you, you're going to forget stuff, you're going to miss stuff. So capture what the 2 essential takeaways were. And having done that, what I'd also like you to do is write down 1 action you're going to take as a result of listening to this conversation between Pam and me. Insight and action is what leads to change and what leads to impact. So you've written down your insights. Make sure you write down your action as well. And Pam, I know people are going to be doing that as we talk. I'm wondering for you, if you had to say, here for me are my 2 essential takeaways, or the 2 things I'd sum up as the 2 gold nuggets that I've offered up in this conversation, what would your 2 summary things be?
I think the first one is stop looking for your single life purpose.
I love that. That's really good.
Relax and enjoy the fact if you already know it, that's awesome and that's fantastic. So great, you're ahead of the game. If not, relax. I think the second thing is trust your emotions. Trust it. Trust your instinct. A lot of what we're often taught, especially in business environments, is to ignore your emotion and to put those things aside and focus on the facts and focus on business. There's a great time and a place for that, which is very helpful. When you're talking about yourself and your life, everything is going to be read through your emotional connection. When you have that, all great things are created from that place.
I love that. They're 2 great places to point. And, in fact, I've even seen research that says that if you aren't able to connect with how you're feeling, you don't have to express it, but even if you're unconnected to how you feel, you think less well. We have this fantasy that if I just put aside the feelings, I'll be able to be rational and focused. But the truth is, it's the acknowledging and incorporating the feelings that allows you to be smarter, that allows you to use your prefrontal cortex and have more power. So 2 great takeaways. It's, relax about the purpose, because, you may have more than one. You may have a range of things that may change over time. And secondly, don't forget to tap into the power of emotion. So your timing is, as ever, Pam, exquisite. We've hit the 27-minute mark. Folks listening in, you can find more information about Pam, obviously on the website, greatworkmba.com, and on her own website. Her book, Escape from Cubicle Nation, is terrific, but dated. No, it's not really dated, but it's 5 years old. But watch for her new book coming out. It's going to be fantastic. Body of work. Pam Slim, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.